Financial feminism, ownership, income, freedom. Financial feminism, more options, more ownership, more freedom.
You're not bad with money. I want to begin here today because there's a woman listening to this podcast who's been carrying that sentence in reverse for years. She's been saying, I'm bad with money. I always mess things up. I should know better by now. I make too much money to still feel this way. I cannot believe I let that happen. I will deal with that later. Maybe she has debt she's ashamed of. Maybe she's opening certain emails because she already knows what they're going to say. Maybe she earns a good salary, but she still feels anxious every time she checks her bank account. Maybe she's never invested. Maybe she started investing and stopped because she didn't understand what she was looking at. Maybe she signed something she didn't fully understand. Maybe she stayed in a relationship longer than she should have because she didn't believe she could afford to leave. Maybe she's helped everyone else financially and now feels embarrassed because she hasn't built enough for herself. Maybe she made one poor decision 20 years ago and it's been creeping up and has been using it as evidence against herself ever since. Listen to me carefully. A poor financial decision doesn't make you a bad person. A lack of financial knowledge doesn't make you unintelligent. Avoidance doesn't mean that you're incapable of changing. And shame is not proof that you're irresponsible. Sometimes shame is simply what grows in the space where education should have been. That is the conversation that I want us to have today. Not a conversation about pretending everything's fine. Not a conversation about avoiding responsibility. And not a conversation about blaming everyone else for every decision we've ever made. This is a conversation about telling the truth without destroying ourselves in the process. Because many women were given responsibility before we were given information. We were told to be careful. We were told to save. We were told not to spend too much. We were told even to get a good job. We were told to marry well. We were told to keep something put away for a rainy day, but for many of us, we were never taught how money actually works. We weren't taught how interest grows. We weren't taught how credit decisions follow us. We weren't taught how taxes affect our income, and we were not taught how to negotiate. We were definitely not taught how retirement accounts work. Here's the thing. There is a difference between income and ownership, but were we taught that? We weren't taught how to read financial documents. We weren't taught how to build business credit. We weren't taught how insurance can protect wealth, and we were not taught how assets grow. We weren't even taught how wealth is transferred, and we definitely were not taught how to ask the right questions before signing our names. And then somehow, after being handed only a few pieces of the puzzle, we were expected to complete the entire picture. When we couldn't, we blamed ourselves. And that's why I want you to remember this sentence. You are not bad with money. You were trained without the rulebook. Let me explain what I mean by that. Most women were taught how to earn. We were taught how to work. We were taught how to be dependable. We were taught how to show up on time. We were taught how to take care of people, and we were taught how to stretch. We were taught how to sacrifice and how to make something out of almost nothing. How to keep the lights on or food on the table. How to make sure everyone else was okay. But earning money and understanding money are not the same thing. Working hard and building wealth are not the same thing. Paying bills and creating ownership are not the same thing. Being responsible and being financially powerful are not the same thing. And that distinction matters because you can be incredibly responsible and still not understand investing. You can be highly educated and still feel intimidated by financial language. You can manage a department. You can lead a team. You can care for patients and raise children. You can even run a household and still freeze when someone asks you about your retirement plan. You can earn six figures and still carry money shame. You can own a business and still avoid looking at your profit margins. You can have an advanced degree even and still feel embarrassed asking someone to explain a financial term. That doesn't make you a contradiction. It makes you a woman who mastered the things she was taught and now confronting the things that she was not. And I know something about mastering what is directly in front of you. Work the shift, finish the assignment, lead the team, handle the crisis, take care of the family, solve the problem, and then move to the next thing. And many capable women live their entire lives this way, right? We become these experts at responding. But financial ownership requires us to pause long enough to examine. Where's my money going? What is growing? What's draining me? What am I building? What do I own? What am I signing? What am I avoiding? And what happens if this income disappears? What am I leaving behind? And those questions require something that many women have rarely been given around money. Permission to slow down and learn without feeling stupid. And that's where grace enters the conversation. Grace isn't pretending you didn't make mistakes. Grace isn't ignoring the numbers. Grace isn't another word for denial. Grace allows you to look directly at the truth without using the truth as a weapon against yourself. And there's a difference between saying, I made a decision that hurt me, and saying, I ruin everything. There's a difference between saying, I didn't understand the loan, and saying, I'm stupid. There's a difference between saying, I avoided my finances for a long time, and saying, I will never change. There's a difference between accountability and condemnation. See, accountability asks, what happened? What did it cost? What can I learn? What do I do now? And condemnation says, this is who you are. You should be ashamed. You don't look too closely. Don't tell anyone. There's no point in trying. One creates movement, the other creates hiding. And hiding, ladies, it's expensive. Money shame can cost you far more than the original mistake. It can keep you from negotiating your salary because you don't trust yourself. It can keep you from opening a retirement account because you're afraid of choosing the wrong one. It can keep you from meeting with a financial professional because you don't want anyone to see the truth. It can keep you from leaving a bad arrangement. It can keep you from starting a business. It can keep you from asking what you're worth. It can keep you from checking your credit report. It can keep you from opening the letter or answering the phone. And it can keep you from having an honest conversation with your spouse or your partner or your family or yourself. See, the original problem may be money, but shame turns it into silence. And silence gives the problem room to grow. And that's why today is not about becoming perfect with money. It's about becoming honest enough to learn. Now, the missing rulebook cycle. I want to talk to you about this pattern. It begins with limited financial education. You're expected to make decisions, but nobody thoroughly explains how those decisions work. Then comes confusion, and you don't understand the language. You don't know what questions to ask. You don't even know what you don't know. And then you make a decision. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes it costs you more than you expected. Sometimes the consequences don't even show up until years later. And here comes the shame. You think, hey, I should have known. Everybody else seems to understand this. I can't let anybody know. And then comes the avoidance. And you stop checking. You stop asking. You stop reading. You stop opening, and you stop trying. See, avoidance creates more confusion, and then more confusion creates less ownership. And let me say this cycle plainly. No education, confusion. A costly decision, shame. Avoidance, more confusion. Less ownership, that cycle continues for years. And sometimes it can continue for generations. A mother feels ashamed of what she doesn't know, so she doesn't discuss money with her daughter. And then the daughter grows up without the information, and she makes her own mistakes. And then here's what happens. She starts to feel ashamed too. Nobody's intentionally trying to keep the cycle alive, but silence preserves what honesty couldn't interrupt. And that's why financial feminism matters. That's why financial conversations matter. This is why women must be able to say, I don't understand this yet. Can you explain it without making me feel small? That word matters. Yet. I don't understand investing yet. I don't know how to read this statement yet. I don't understand my benefits yet. I haven't learned how to negotiate yet. I don't have a financial plan yet. Yet leaves the door open. Shame tries to close it. This episode of the Financial Feminism podcast is presented by the Financial Feminism community. We're building a space where women can have honest conversations about money, ownership, leadership, business, technology, and the future without pretending they already know everything. This is not about performing success. It's about learning, asking better questions, and making stronger decisions together. Our Thursday evening live conversations begin in August. Visit ownthepurse.com to learn more about what we're building. I want to talk to you about why money shame can affect even women who appear to be doing very well. From the outside, people may see the career. They may see the education. They may even see the title or the business or the house, maybe even the car or, a leadership role. And they may assume that financial confidence automatically came with those things. It did not. And a woman can know how to succeed professionally without knowing how to protect what she earns. She can know how to generate revenue without knowing how to manage profitability. She can know how to care for everything else or everyone else without knowing how to prepare for her own future. And she can be the person everyone calls in a crisis and still feel completely unprepared for a financial emergency. There's a particular kind of shame that comes when your life looks successful, but your finances don't feel secure. And you think, people expect me to know better. I'm too old to ask this question. I have too many degrees to be confused about this. I earn too much to feel behind. But money doesn't care how impressive your resume is. Financial knowledge is its own body of knowledge. Nobody expects a brilliant attorney to perform surgery without training. And nobody expects a nurse to prepare corporate tax returns simply because she's intelligent. Nobody expects that teacher to understand estate planning because she's educated. But women often expect themselves to understand every area of money without ever being formally taught. And then we become frustrated when intelligence doesn't automatically fill an education gap. There's no shame in needing to learn something outside of your field. The problem is not that you need education. The problem is that shame has convinced you that needing education is evidence of failure. And it's not. Learning is not an admission that you're incapable. Learning is how capable people expand. And think about the first time that you learned a difficult skill. You didn't start out as an expert. You asked questions. You practiced. You made mistakes. You learned the language. And you watched someone else. Then you tried again. Well, why should money be any different? Why should you be expected to master something that you have never been allowed to practice openly? This is one of the reasons that financial feminism is not just about telling women to save more money. Most women have already heard that. Save more is not a complete strategy. Save how much? For what purpose? Where should it be kept? What should happen after the emergency fund is built? How does inflation help it? How does it affect it? What should be invested? What should remain accessible? What if you're also paying debt? What if your income changes every month? What if you're supporting family members? That's a good one. What if you are rebuilding after a divorce? What if you're starting late? And what if you've never seen anyone in your family invest? A slogan can't answer those questions. Women need context. They need language. They need practical steps. They need a place to ask. And they need to know that their questions don't make them feel foolish. I want to give you another reframe. Perhaps you weren't bad with money. Perhaps you were making the best decisions you knew how to make with the information, pressure, responsibilities, and options you had at the time. That does not mean every decision was wise. It means the full story matters. There are women who took on debt because they were trying to just survive. Women who used credit cards to feed their children. Women who stayed in underpaid roles because the health insurance covered their families. Women who drained their retirement accounts during emergencies. Women who co-signed because they were trying to help somebody they loved. And even women who didn't invest because every extra dollar was already assigned. Women who gave away more than they could afford because they had been taught that saying no was selfish. Women who remained financially entangled with people because they didn't understand the consequences. The goal is not to romanticize those decisions. The goal is to examine them honestly. What did you know then? What pressures were you under? What belief was guiding you? What would you do differently now? And that's how wisdom develops, right? Wisdom it's not ever making a mistake or not making a mistake. It's refusing to waste the lesson inside of the mistake. And, some women are so committed to pushing their younger selves that they can't help their present selves. And they keep replaying the same moment. I shouldn't have signed that. I shouldn't have trusted them. I shouldn't have borrowed that money. I shouldn't have quit that job. I shouldn't have waited so long. Perhaps you shouldn't have, but you did. And now what? The question isn't cruel, it's liberating, right? The question is, now what? What can be renegotiated? What can be paid down? What can be closed? What can be open? What can be automated? What can be sold? What can be learned? What can be changed? What can be protected? What can you begin today? Ownership begins when we stop arguing with what has already happened and start deciding what happens next. There's a difference between shame and responsibility. Now, I need to make this distinction very clear. Financial feminism doesn't remove personal responsibility. It just restores productive responsibility. You see, shame says, hide the problem. Responsibility says, measure the problem. Shame says, hey, you're the problem. And responsibility says, there's a problem and it needs a plan. And shame says, you should already know. Responsibility says, find out what you need to know. And shame says, don't let anyone see. But responsibility says, get qualified help. Shame says, you failed. And responsibility says, this decision has consequences, but the story is not finished. See, there's power in separating your identity from your behavior. You may have overspent, but that doesn't mean that you're reckless forever. You might have ignored a financial problem, but that doesn't mean that you're incapable of facing it now. You may have trusted the wrong person, but it doesn't mean that you can never trust your judgment again. You might have even started late, but it doesn't mean starting is pointless. You can own the decision without turning the decision into your identity. Now, that sentence may be one of the most important things that you hear today. You can own the decision without turning the decision into your identity. Because once identity gets attached to the problem, every solution feels like a threat. And if you believe I'm bad with money, then learning about money forces you to confront who you think you are. But when you say, there are parts of money that I have not learned yet, the problem becomes teachable. And teachable problems can be solved. I want to give you 3 rules you can begin using today. Not 20, not 50, 3. Rule 1. Every number is information. Your bank balance is information. Your credit score is information. Your debt total is information. Your retirement balance, it's information. Your monthly income, that's information. Your spending history is information. Information may be uncomfortable, but information is not an insult. The number is not calling you irresponsible. The number is not calling you foolish. The number is showing you where you are. And you cannot build a reliable route from a location that you refuse to identify. Imagine opening up a map and then refusing to let it use your current location because you're embarrassed about where you're standing. The map can't help you. And money works the same way. Your current position is not your permanent destination, but it must be acknowledged. I knew I know plenty of women who are terrified to add up their debt. They believe that not knowing the total somehow protects them from the reality. It doesn't. The number already exists, and knowing it gives you the ability to make decisions. Not knowing it allows fear to invent a number that may be even worse. So the first rule is simple. Every number is information. It's not an indictment. Rule 2, questions create ownership. There's no prize for signing something that you don't understand, and there's no prize for nodding politely while someone uses language that confuses you. There's no prize for staying silent because you don't want to appear difficult. Ask, what does this cost over the full term? Is this the fixed rate or variable? What happens if I pay early? What happens if I miss a payment? What fees are included? What's not included? Who owns this account? Who's the beneficiary? When can I access the money? What are the tax consequences? What happens if this person dies? What happens if we separate? What happens if my income changes? What alternatives are available? Questions aren't evidence that you're unprepared. Questions are how you prepare. And women are often praised for being agreeable, but agreement without understanding can become very expensive. You're allowed to pause. You're allowed to take the document home. You're allowed to ask for another explanation. You're allowed to speak with someone else. And you're allowed to say, I don't understand this well enough to sign today. That's not weakness, that's ownership. Rule 3, confidence comes after repetition. Many women are waiting to feel confident before they begin. They want to feel ready before they review the numbers, ready before they invest, and ready before they negotiate, ready before they ask for help. But financial confidence is rarely the starting point. It's the result of repeated contact. If you become more confident checking your accounts because you check them regularly, that's normal. If you become more confident discussing your salary because you practice the conversation, that's what we're looking for. And you become more confident when you're investing because you learn the basics and take measured action. You become more confident reading financial documents because you stop avoiding them. Confidence follows evidence. And every time you face something you used to avoid, you create evidence that you can handle it. And that's why the goal this week is not to fix your entire financial life. The goal is to interrupt avoidance. One statement, one account, one question, one decision, one honest conversation, and that's enough to begin. I want to walk you through the resource that's connected to this episode. It's called the Money Shame Reset. You can download it after the episode, but I want to guide you through the questions now. Find a quiet place, when you can, and then use a real notebook if possible. Don't use an app. Give yourself enough time to answer honestly. And the first question is, what is the first money message that you remember hearing? Maybe it was, money doesn't grow on trees, or we can't afford that, or rich people are greedy, or don't talk about money, or maybe it's men handle the finances, or a good woman doesn't ask for too much. Or I've even heard, you should be grateful for whatever you receive, or business is too risky. Investing is gambling. Debt is normal. Debt is shameful. People like us don't become wealthy. Whatever the message was, write it down. Don't judge it yet. Just identify it. The second question is, What financial decision do you still feel embarrassed about? And I want you to be specific. Don't write everything. Not, I'm bad with money. Name the decision. A loan, a purchase, an account you ignored, a relationship, a business decision, a period where you overspent, a retirement withdrawal, a debt you never discussed, a price you charged too low, or a salary maybe that you accepted without negotiating. Whatever it is, write it down without adding an insult to your name. Then the third question is, what did you not know at the time? And this question is important because shame removes context. Perhaps you didn't understand interest. Perhaps you didn't understand the contract. Or maybe you didn't know there were other options. Perhaps you believe the person advising you, or you were under pressure, or you were trying to survive. Perhaps you'd never seen another model. Write down the missing information. And the fourth question is, what do you understand differently today? And this is where you're going to acknowledge growth. Maybe you understand that low monthly payments can hide an expensive total cost. Maybe you understand that love doesn't require financial self-destruction, or that a high income doesn't automatically create wealth. Maybe you understood that credit is a tool, it's not an extension of your self-worth. Maybe you understand that investing is something you can learn, and that you need your own access and records and accounting information. And maybe you understand that generosity requires boundaries. Name what you know now. The fifth question is, what is one financial action I can take this week without shame? 1, check the balance. Request the report. Just one. Call the company. It could be schedule the appointment. Cancel the subscription. Increase the contribution. Ask about the fee. Open the account. Talk to your partner. Create the payment plan. Read the document. Write down the debt. Ask for help. Just choose one. Then I want you to complete this sentence. I will not punish myself for rules I was never taught. I will learn them now. That is the reset. Not denial, not excuses, education, honesty, grace, and action. And I want you to imagine what happens when a woman no longer believes she's bad with money. She starts opening the statements. She starts asking questions. She stops allowing people to rush her. She stops making complicated language and mistaking that language for intelligence. She stops handing over complete control because she assumes someone else knows better. She stops apologizing for wanting clarity and stops measuring her worth by her bank balance. She even stops hiding from the truth. She starts building, slowly at first, and then steadily. But she learns the difference between income and ownership. And she begins to see her experience as an asset and understand that her career can fund her future without becoming her entire future. And then she begins to notice where her money leaves and what remains. She begins to make decisions that create more options, and this is why the work is bigger than budgeting. A budget can tell you where your money should go, but shame can still keep you from looking at it. A spreadsheet can show you numbers, but shame can convince you that those numbers define you. An investment account, it can be open, but shame can still keep you from contributing because you're afraid you're starting too late. We must deal with both the strategy and the story. You see, the strategy asks, what should I do? And the story says, who do I believe I am while I'm doing it? Financial feminism addresses both because a woman who has the right information but still believes she's incapable may never use it. And a woman who feels empowered without receiving practical information may still make avoidable mistakes. We need confidence and competence, grace and accountability, vision and systems, belief and action. And that's how ownership grows. And I want to speak directly to the woman who thinks she's too late. You may be looking at your age or your debt, your savings, the years that passed, and the decisions you wish to undo. And you may believe that the rule book arrived after the game was almost over. It did not. Your strategy may need to be different. Your timeline may need to be honest. You may have less room for unnecessary risk. You may need support. You may need to make uncomfortable changes, but late is not the same as never. A woman who begins at 50 is still ahead of the woman who waits until 60 because she was ashamed to begin at 50. A woman who asks the question today knows more than she did yesterday. And a woman who faces the number today has more power than she had while avoiding it. A woman who changes one financial habit this month has interrupted a pattern that may have existed for generations. So don't underestimate the value of interruption. You may not be able to change the beginning, but you can change what gets repeated. Your daughter may hear you say, "I made mistakes and I learned." Your son may see you ask questions. Your family may watch you set boundaries. Your grandchildren may inherit knowledge that never reached you. And legacy is not only the amount of money that you leave, it's also the silence you break, the language you teach, the ownership you model, the options you create. Now, before next week, do one thing. Download the Money Shame Reset. Complete it honestly. And then share one lesson with one woman that you trust. You don't have to share every number. You don't have to disclose anything private. Simply tell her, "Here's one money belief I'm changing." And then ask her, what is one financial rule you wish somebody had taught you earlier? That conversation may teach both of you something, because financial freedom spreads through conversations that women were once too ashamed to have. And I want to bring you back to where we started. You are not bad with money. You may need a plan. You may need education. You may need help. You may need boundaries or to repair something. You may need to begin again. But none of those needs make you bad. You were trained to work, to earn, to give, to stretch, to survive, and now it's time to learn how to own. Own the information. Own the questions. Own the decisions. Own the lesson. Own the next step. Own your future. You don't have to know every rule today. You simply have to stop using what you were never taught as evidence that you can't learn. Download the Money Shame Request at ownthepurse.com. Complete it before next week. And remember, you are not bad with money. You were trained without the rule book. That changes now, because ownership creates options.
Financial feminism, ownership, income, freedom. Financial feminism, more options, more ownership, more freedom.